Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? It is game week for the New Orleans Saints, y'all. The Saints are on the field on Sunday, noon Central, against the Carolina Panthers division game. Saints are a 4.5-point favorite, and they're still looking to adjust the roster as they inch closer to kickoff of the opener. In fact, they worked out a former first-round pick at receiver. I'll tell you who in 30 seconds, but here was Dennis Allen talking about being game week in his third season as the Saints head coach.
All right, game week. So excited to be here working. Thought we had good practice today, and we're excited about the opportunity to start off with a division opponent. Look, they got a lot of new faces from a personnel standpoint. Got some new faces in terms of coaching staff standpoint. There'll be a lot of adjusting that'll need to be done as the game moves along. But we're certainly excited about having an opportunity to start out, open up division opponent in our building, and I think our guys will be ready to play.
Maybe the most curious part about this, though, is that it is game week. Now that we sit here as we're talking live on Tuesday, you're 5 days away from your opener. And the Saints are working out receivers. I mean, we talked for the last month about that position group. And listen, you could take my opinion. You could have your opinion. I think most of us agree the first two are really good, right? Chris Olave is a 1,000-yard receiver. I think Rashid Shaheed has every bit that potential. After that, it's fall off a cliff bad. Your number 3 last year was Michael Thomas. He's gone. So now are you looking at A.T. Perry? Are you looking at Cedric Wilson? Are you looking at Bub Means? I don't know who that's going to be. Pro Football Focus, for whatever it's worth, ranks the New Orleans Saints wide receiver group 24th in the NFL. 24th out of 32. So right there in the bottom quarter of the teams in the NFL. Only the Jags, Steelers, Bills, Giants, Panthers, Broncos, Chargers, Patriots, they rank worse than the Saints. So whether you're looking at a subjective point of view like mine or yours, or an objective metric like Pro Football Focus that many people agree with, this isn't a very talented receiver room. I think you're top heavy with your first two guys, but after that is where you have a really big question. Now, can they maybe manipulate that some by using Alvin Kamara and using Juwan Johnson, using Taysom Hill? Absolutely. So creativity with the offense matters, but if you're just talking about the receiver position, it is a giant question. And the Saints worked out a handful of receivers on Monday, and among that group is former first-round pick John Ross. Now, if you remember John Ross, he came into the NFL back in 2017, the same year as Alvin Kamara, out of the University of Washington. And the thing about John Ross that popped, that vaulted him all the way up into the draft, into the first round, was when he went to the combine, he ran a 4.22 40, which was an NFL record at the time at the combine when he ran 4.22. Because of that time, he was vaulted all the way into the top 10, and Cincinnati took him 9th overall back in the 2017 draft. And it wasn't great for John Ross in Cincinnati. Part of it was injury. Part of it was that it just didn't translate. He had great speed, no doubt, but the consistency was never really there. After, a handful of sort of injury-plagued seasons in Cincinnati, he went and spent the 2021 season with the Giants and then the last 2 seasons with the Chiefs and the Eagles on their practice squads. So when you look at it, John Ross hasn't played an NFL game the last 2 seasons. In 2022 and 2023, he didn't play in an NFL game. The last time he took the field in an NFL game on a Sunday was in 2021 with the Giants. So it's been a hot minute for John Ross. But this reminds me a lot of when the Saints signed Kevin White back in 2021. You remember Kevin White? Very similar. Kevin White was a speedster, big-time playmaker, wide receiver out of West Virginia. The Bears took him 7th overall, had injury issues from jump in Chicago, and it just never materialized. The Saints back in 2021, when they had some issues at receiver, you remember Michael Thomas obviously was going through his ankle thing, and then Deontay Harris, later Deontay Hardy, was going to be suspended, which ultimately he was. So the Saints knew that they were going to be short a couple of their big-time playmakers at receiver, and so they were looking for options, and they looked at Kevin White and said, that's a guy that had the physical ability to be a top 10 pick, a first-round pick, the number 7 pick in the draft. What if we can squeeze something, some juice out of the orange? So they brought him in, and Kevin White played games for the Saints. And I look at John Ross in a very similar manner, and the Saints have gone down this road. It's always the question whenever you're looking at a free agent. Do you want to look at a veteran player who is near the end of his career but has skins on the wall, who has been a Sunday player in his career, and you just don't know what's left? Or do you want to maybe lean on younger guys and sort of betting on the come to see if you can get some upside, which the ceiling might not be very high, but you're further from the floor, I guess, if that makes sense. So you look at John Ross, and he's a guy who his best season was his second year in Cincinnati, where he played 13 games that year. The next year, 2019 in Cincinnati, he caught 28 balls for 506 yards, 3 touchdowns, averaged over 18 yards a reception. So, yes, that was 2019. I mean, that's 5 years ago. I don't know that he's anywhere even remotely close to that, having not even played the last 2 seasons. But can John Ross, at this point in his career, at 29 years old, find something that made him a first-round draft pick? Kind of like we talked about with Michael Thomas a year ago. You aren't asking Michael Thomas to come in and be the Michael Thomas that caught 160 passes and was the NFL Offensive Player of the Year. You were asking Michael Thomas to come in and be your number 3. And had he stayed healthy, he could have been able to do that. So I look at John Ross and I go, I don't need you to come in and get 50 targets on the season. I need you to come in and be a guy that can add a dimension to the offense that may not be there. Now, I think you have the speed element, obviously, with Rashid Shaheed, but is it a guy that maybe could fill that role of depth? Like maybe he's a practice squad guy that if you need a receiver, you could sign him to the active roster, activate him on game day, kind of an up-down guy. But sans other better options, I kind of get it. I mean, it's a similar feeling, and I like this path, and I'm not saying it's the correct methodology, but I like it. It's one of the reasons I've kind of lobbied this offseason for the Saints to sign David Bakhtiari. I'm not telling you David Bakhtiari is all-pro David Bakhtiari anymore, but that is a guy who has been an all-pro in his career, and it only got derailed due to injuries last year in Green Bay, sat out last season. Like, could you get anything? Could you get a bottom-tier starter out of David Bakhtiari today? Well, that's better than a guy that's a borderline make the roster, miss the roster type guy. So I kind of look at John Ross similarly, a guy whose best days are behind him, but who has been a guy that's played. I mean, John Ross has played in 37 games with 21 starts, and he scored 11 career touchdowns. Like, can he be your 4th or 5th guy who can give you some reps? Maybe. So I don't hate that idea if they choose to go that direction. Ross wasn't the only receiver they worked out, however. Phillip Dorsett, Ja'Cour Pearson, Amir Smith-Marset, and David Wallace were all working out on Monday as well for the New Orleans Saints. No word as of right now if the Saints have or will sign any of these guys to a contract, active roster, or practice squad. We'll see how that goes. But sometimes the way that this works in the NFL, I mean, you probably know this, is you work out guys, you bring them in to keep an updated scouting report in the event that you need somebody. So you have an updated scouting report now on a handful of receivers. So if you get through week 1 and go, man, there was an injury or we need help, I need depth there, you have a scouting report on 5 guys that you could say, okay, let's sign that guy. So it's always going to be interesting. It's going to grab headlines when you bring in a former first round or former top 10 pick like John Ross, a guy who hasn't played football in 2 years, but if there's a positive spin to it, and he's healthy. He hasn't had 2 years of wear and tear on his body. But well-known name was at the Saints facility on Monday working out. We'll see what the Saints elect to do with these roster spots. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.